All right, this is Sons of the Forest. I never played the Forest, and this game wasn't really on my radar, but I've been seeing comments on my channel asking, hey, am I going to test this thing out? Well, we just landed off the helicopter crash. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I do know that this is a GTX 1066 gigabyte, and we are currently running at the medium graphics settings at 1080p, and I just left it on the medium defaults preset, other than I did turn off motion blur, because I know how many of you feel about motion blur. Now, personally, I feel like if you're, how should I put this? If you're getting low frame rate, sometimes motion blur in some games can kind of help smooth things out. Wait, what did I just do? Am I helping him? Okay. All right, for a second, I saw the rock there, and I was afraid that clicking on... I accidentally clicked the rock, and that might hurt him or something. This guy does not seem to be feeling well. Anyway, so it's looking like performance at medium settings is so far, I mean, at least playable, but we are way below 60 FPS. By the way, this game does have multiplayer. I've decided to go to the single-player version of this, so I guess we're gonna have him. He should build. How do I select things? Build a fire. All right, friend, build me a fire. You just stick it to him. Okay. Interesting. What is... All right, we got some stuff. I'm sure I have an inventory, but we are testing out performance. A little bit of stutters as we go into the trees here. I was afraid performance would tank getting into this foliage, but it doesn't look too bad yet. Man, my mouse sensitivity is way too high, but we're not really playing the game. We're really more testing it out. All right, so it's looking like we are in the mid 40 FPS range here, just kind of walking through the forest, unfortunately. So let's go down to low settings and see if that does anything for us. So low settings. I should actually probably do an average now as well. So we'll get an average frame rate run here. So low settings, seems like there's less foliage going on. You can see some trees popping in. Yeah, foliage kind of fades into view. Not great. Looks like we're still a little below 60 FPS. But close to it. So it looks like at low settings, the 1060 is going to be able to play this game near, but probably frequently below 60 frames per second. Let's do the average again now, switching back to the medium settings. So switching back to medium settings, we're dropping down into the mid 40s in this same scene. And I think what we're gonna do here now is kind of look at the different graphic settings. So going up to high, you can see we're getting more foliage. Performance drops into the lower 40s. Again, we're not moving yet. We will walk around at these various settings. Going to ultra settings. We are now down also to kind of the lower 40s. All right, let's look at ultra settings. So we are on ultra settings. Playing in the mid 40s-ish, overlooking the beach. Let's head this way. Okay, with a few more trees in the distance, we're certainly doing worse. We're down a little over 30. Certainly looks a lot better at the ultra settings. You're getting not so much of that pop-in happening. That's the main thing I'm noticing. Not that there isn't any, but the draw distance out there is making a big difference. A lot more trees. The details on the ground and all that certainly seem a lot better. Shadows, things like that. So here's ultra. We're at 38 frames per second or so. Let's go ahead and drop back to low again, just for the kind of instant comparison. Yeah, so you can tell that there's a huge loss to the the details going down to the low settings here. But it's looking like the game at least scales well enough that you can get around 60 FPS if what you value is the... Oh my goodness. What is this? No, leave me alone. I lost track of him. There he is. My mouse sensitivity, it's just absolutely crazy. I really need to change it. Yeah, I've got to say, guys, it's nice that the low settings do boost performance so high. But that is at a major hit to visual quality, for sure. Let's go ahead and take another look. Yeah, there's that same scene on Ultra. It's like a completely different experience. But in the end, it looks like we are... Like, what is this guy doing? Where was he? I don't know. Anyway. All right, so I'm going to deem this absolutely playable on the 1060. I think we should try out some other GPUs while we're here. All right, the 3060 Ti has decided that at 1440p, we land in the forest by a nice little lake. I went ahead and started the frame rate averages. Again, current frame rate on the left, average in the middle, 1% lows on the right. You can see the frame time graph, and it's looking like we are at or above 60 FPS most of the time running around this this area. I think we are at the ultra settings. Let me just double check that for you guys. Ultra preset, I turned off DLSS, which defaulted to on, and turned off the motion blur. We are at 1440p. So it is looking like, yeah, 3060 Ti can hold pretty easily at or above 60 FPS, at least while just running around the forest. Now, the game also does have DLSS, so if I did want to bump performance a little bit further, that would be an option. So we could try that out a little bit, DLSS Quality. So that is going to render the game at a lower internal resolution, and then use the DLSS algorithm to output a, well, there's a stutter right there, output a 1440p like image. To my eye, it's looking a little bit, yeah, I can tell a sharpening difference, like the algorithm's using a little more of a sharpening filter than the native does. It does look like you're getting a decent little performance boost off of doing that. And yeah, I mean, we could test out 1080p just to see what sort of performance we would get, but it looks like we can already hit 1440p pretty well on the 3060 Ti. All right, at 1080p, it looks like the 3060 Ti has decided to spawn on the beach, like our 1060 did, running into the forest here. We are in the 80s, upper 80s FPS range. This should be dropping into the mid to low 70s. This should be all the ultra settings and all that. Let's double check. Ultra, no resolution scaling, 1080p. And so yeah, as expected, we're getting very good performance at 1080p on the 3060 Ti. Again, obviously you could turn down settings, upscale, any of that, but to me, I think for this style of game, getting around over 80 FPS seems perfectly good to me. Let's test out some other GPUs. All right, looks like my RTX 3080 decided I should start in a snowy mountain instead of the foresty stuff we were at before. Looks like we're still getting some stutters as we enter the, you know, the unknown. Performance seems good. Let me go ahead and start an average counter. So I guess, unfortunately, this isn't going to be an apples-to-apples comparison. I guess you don't start the game in the same place every time, which makes my testing a little bit different. However, these are ultra settings at 1440p. Take a look at the water. I wonder if I can jump on down to some more foresty type areas and see what kind of performance hit we might take. There's a stutter again. Again, if you watch the frame time graph, so the game certainly seems to have those. No, this is definitely an early access game too, so maybe at some point they could add in some more of a shader compilation or figure out what's going on with that. I don't usually test early access games, but this game seemed to have a lot of interest, so I'm going ahead and checking it out. Yeah, it's looking like even running through the foresty areas rather than the snowy area, performance is still quite high at 1440p ultra settings. I will let you see those just to double check. 1440p ultra. I turned off the dynamic resolution scaling, which turned on DLSS when I started up the game. And then I also turned off motion blur. Let's go ahead and try this out at 4K resolution. And I will probably, yeah, it looks like I'll have to restart the game again. Let's see if we even end up in the same place. Well, it is looking like my 3080 is liking this snowy mountain peak. We are now at 4K ultra settings, and it looks like we are right around 60 FPS. Not saying that there's no dips whatsoever, but I think once again, I would like to take that little jog down through the forest and see how things go. Also, since this game does feature DLSS, as well as lowering resolution settings, I think it'll be nice to see what kind of performance we can get beyond 60 FPS. So it is nice that it looks like you can max the game out at 4K on a 3080 class GPU without needing to do any kind of performance scaling tricks. Apparently I just about killed myself. That's useful. And yeah, in the forest, still around 60. Looks like we're dipping slightly under at times. So I think I'd like to look at the difference between going down to high settings versus enabling some DLSS. So let's go with DLSS. Let's go to the quality setting. And so if you weren't sure where DLSS was, it's hidden under the dynamic resolution settings. So if we go DLSS quality, so that's going to now internally render the game at 1440p. I'm resetting my frame rate counters. It's going to internally render the game at 1440p and then upscale using the DLSS algorithm. Of course, you'll need an RTX NVIDIA GPU to use DLSS. Looks like the game did have some other upscaling options. If that's not available, yeah, and now we're over 80 FPS. The average is right at 81, running through the forest and such. So even if there were more demanding areas than this one, because obviously this is not a comprehensive test of the entire game, it looks like DLSS definitely gets you some headroom at 4K, and this is DLSS at the quality setting. You could go more aggressive. Another thing I'd want to look at is the difference between going down to DLSS well, just using DLSS, if we go back to the native resolution, versus just going down to maybe the high settings. Now, in different games, one will look better than the other. In this game, it seems like the draw distance on things is a big deal. Also, it seems like we didn't get as big of a performance boost going down to high as we did using DLSS quality. Now, some people are more picky about the upscaling, big stutter there, more picky about the upscaling that you get versus other graphic settings, that kind of thing. Here, I'd say the amount of performance boost we got there from DLSS versus how far we're having to turn down the settings to get a similar performance boost. So even here, we're only just now getting to around 70-ish, similar to what we were getting off the DLSS, but that was going down to all the way to the medium settings, which I think does have a noticeable, like, if you look at the bush in front of me here, right, as we walk forward, there's a lot more pop-in on that bush by having to, turn down the view distances and things like that, versus if we go back up to the ultra settings and use the upscaling. So see, if we go back to ultra settings with DLSS here, our performance is higher and that bush still exists, right, at a distance, much less draw-in. So I would say that even if you're not a huge fan of some of the small issues with DLSS upscaling, I think that turning down the settings, especially things that increase the pop-in nearby, is a more noticeable decline to the image quality. So I think using the upscaling with DLSS, if it's available, makes the most sense to me. Let's go ahead and test out another GPU. All right, looks like the 4090 is back on the beach, and we are stuttering as we enter the forest again. So again, it seems like anytime I swap in a new GPU, so it would have to, compile shaders again, we are getting these stutters. So it does look like some kind of shader compilation stutters happening. But I will say that on the 4090, we are over 100 FPS at 4K Ultra settings. So let's go ahead and double check all of that. We're at 4K, graphics settings are Ultra, we don't have any resolution scaling. Although just for fun, I mean, we can already see we're 100 FPS over, at 4K. Let's just kick on some DLSS and just see, like, if we wanted a even higher frame rate, how far can we push this thing? Almost feels like I'm getting frame rate capped. The GPU is not quite fully utilized, and it's bouncing up against the 120. I went over 120, though, so maybe there's not a frame rate cap. But maybe we're starting to hit a CPU limit here a little bit, around 120 frames per second or so. The CPU is the Ryzen 7700X on 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 memory. And so I have a feeling if I push this even further, we're just not going to get much more performance because I think we're running up to CPU limits. Yeah, it's looking like the GPU just becomes less fully utilized and we're bouncing around those same FPS numbers. But looks like the CPU was good for the native resolution at 4K, about 100 FPS on the 4090. So, yeah. Overall, I would have liked to have tested out some of my AMD GPUs. I know some of you guys are going to be disappointed that I'm not. But honestly, my kids are about to wake up, trying to make this video before they wake up. And also, I'd been having some driver issues on the most recent drivers that I have not sorted out yet. So anyway, I just don't think I have time to deal with that for this particular video. I hope all of you have an excellent day.